Hi everybody, my name is Jen, the Caffeinated Crafter, and welcome to my FlossTube channel. This is a channel where I normally talk about all the cross-stitch projects that I have, but today is a FlossTube extra. We are going to be going over full coverage stuff. What is it? What's it all about? Why do people do it? Why do people do so many? How do you get into it? What do you need to get into it? So, what is a full coverage project? A full coverage project is a design where every square of the design has a stitch in it. There are partial full coverages where it's like mostly stitched with a few scattered spots here and there that are blank, where it's the fabric showing through, but for the most part, a true full coverage pattern, every single piece of the fabric design area is covered with thread, be it half stitches, full stitches, whatever. So how big are they? Not all of them are big. I have some examples I'm going to show you of different size full coverage pieces. And I have them ranging from ginormous to really tiny. Some kits are considered full coverage. Dimensions has some kits that are either completely full coverage or mostly full coverage. I forgot to grab it, but I do have one that I just started where there's like a little bit of fabric, Cherry Blossom Creek, where like a little bit of fabric in the sky is showing through, but the rest of it is covered in thread. I have a small kit that I'll show you in a few minutes that is considered full coverage because even though it's small, every single design, like space, every single square on the pattern is covered in a stitch. So why do people do full coverage? Honestly, it's the same reason that you do any other stitching project. It's just what they like to do. Some people prefer to do samplers. Some people prefer to do projects with nothing but words. Some people prefer to do black work. Some people prefer to do fancy specialty stitches with a little bit of cross stitching mixed in. Some people prefer to do very simple patterns that they can knock out in anywhere from a couple hours to a day. It's just all your preference. You may try it and you might not like it. I had a friend who ended up having me adopt 2 of her full coverage projects because she said she was never going to do them. She tried them and she didn't like them, and that's okay. You don't have to like it. You don't even have to like what other people do. It's just, you know. So let me show you some examples of some full coverage pieces, and then we'll kind of get into what the what all is involved with getting stuff to do a full coverage piece, and how you would go about kind of tackling doing a full coverage piece. So the first example I'm going to show you is actually a current whip of mine. It is from the Heaven and Earth Designs Stitch Along, a closed SAL that they're doing. A SAL is a stitch along. And this is like a little snippet from Amy Stewart's Merry Mushroom Village Picnic, and it's this one is called Merry Mushroom Village Picnic 2. So I have this on Pattern Keeper, but if you bought this and you printed it out, this would be the cover photo, and this gives you basically the picture of what it's going to look like. Has on there who did the pattern and you know, like copyright stuff or whatever, and then, you know, the artist of the actual design, and then down here it has the size. So it's going to be 300 by 205. This tells you over here, if you stitched it on 25 count, this tells you how big the design size would be. And then it tells you, not all of them do this, but some of them will tell you how many colors the piece has. So this one has 90. All of the designs will tell you what the size is of the finished piece. So like I said, this one is 300 by 205. And for the most part, if the pattern maker is a reputable one that does not steal other people's art and actually is like a legit pattern maker, their mock-ups tend to look exactly like what your finished product ends up being. So I'm going to show you what mine looks like so far. This is kind of partial like that because this particular piece is being put out in installments. And so what I'm doing is I'm stitching this on a 28 count easy count Lugana. We'll go over fabric in a little bit, but I happen to have this piece of fabric. This is going to be plenty big. I'll actually be able to cut off a portion of this and use it for I was trying to see how big, how many more pages. Yeah, no, so where that ends over here, this is the end of the piece. So if I give myself a couple inches right here, once I'm gonna wait until I'm done with it, but once I'm done with it, I'll actually have this whole piece of fabric right here that I could put another design on, a smaller one, of course. And then, like I said, we'll go over fabric in a little bit. A smaller full coverage piece is this small little kit that I got from Busilla, like, I don't know, probably in like 1864. But this is what it's going to look like. And as you can see, every single stitch or every single square is stitched. There's no fabric showing through this piece. And I'm not done with it, but that's how big it's gonna be. I mean, like, that's my hand, and I don't have very big hands. So it's not gonna be very big. It's only gonna go up to like maybe right about here. So, but this is still considered a full coverage piece because it's completely covered in stitches. And this is being stitched on a 14 count fabric. I just want to show some examples of some full coverage pieces. So that was 2 different companies. Let me see. This one is from the Cross Stitch Studio, and if you've seen any of my floss tubes, you've seen it time and time again. This is from the Cross Stitch Studio. This one is Honeymoon Sunset. And as you can see here, she also has the size and the amount of colors that you need. And when you get the PDF, and if you go on her website, it tells you who the artist is, but when you get the PDF, it'll tell you right here who the artist is, Abraham Hunter. And this one is being stitched on a 25 count fabric, so it's going to be a decent size. What I will say about full coverage pieces is don't mind the park threads. That's for another video. But that's where I'm at with that one. Now I prefer to use pre-gridded fabric because I don't really care to grid my own fabric. Like, I have some that I had to grid, and I'm probably, I don't know if I'm going to keep gridding once I get past that grid. I don't know. But as you can see, it's very realistic looking up in the tree from hell. That's what I've called that palm tree. There is another piece from the Cross Stitch Studio. Now this piece is 869 by 649. So it's 869 stitches wide by 649 stitches tall. And then I have another piece that's even bigger. I have another piece that's even bigger, stitch-wise. This one is also from the Cross Stitch Studio, and it's the same artist, and this one is Catching Rays. If you're a subscriber, you have not seen this in a hot minute, but this one is Catching Rays, and it is 1200 by 900. that thing is freaking ginormous. So that's 1,200 stitches going across, right? And then 900 stitches going down. So I'm doing this one on a 32 count piece of fabric, and that's where I'm at with it so far. These are like almost 4 complete pages, and I decided to do it in checkerboard, but honestly, like, I'll talk about that later. I think I might change up how I'm stitching it, but this is the fabric. Now, it's not going to go over all the way. I think I might have like I think I might have that much. I don't remember. I know it's plenty big, but still, this is the piece of fabric. This piece of fabric takes up half of my bed. I have a queen size bed, and it takes up half the bed. Like, it's huge, right? And this is 32 count. So for every inch of fabric, there's 32 stitches going across it. I could have done it on a higher count fabric, but I don't think they make the easy count fabric in a higher count than 32. I really don't remember. I didn't really look. I was comfortable with 32, but it's hard to see the hole. Well, maybe you can, but these are the holes for 32 count right here, right? And these are the holes for 25 count. Much easier to see. Is that easier to tell the difference? So it's also a little magnified because of the camera, but as you can see, maybe I'm doing this spur of the moment, so I'm not sure how well this is going to make a difference. You see how, if I actually had this straight, might be able to tell the difference. There we go. But you see the 25 count is in the back and the 32 count is in the front. And then where's my 28 count? Let's do it like this. Do it like this, and then like this, and then like this. So in the very back, we have 25 count, and then 28, and then 32. So as you can see, the squares for 100-inch square blocks get smaller and smaller the higher the count you go, right? Because the lower the number on your fabric, the bigger the stitch is, which means the bigger the piece is. A lot of people, when they start off stitching, they start off typically on a 14 count fabric. And as they start getting into full coverage projects and they see all these different pieces and they want to stitch them all, it gets harder and harder to find 14 count fabric big enough. Some people will do 18. I have a piece that's on a 20 count. Actually, I have 2 pieces that are on 20 count fabric right now that are full coverage. I started one on 22. I did not like it, so I'm going to restart it. Hopefully this year, if I pull it out of the basket, I'm going to restart it on, I think, a 28 count maybe. So how do you decide what size fabric you want to get? So let's move on from my crap. How do you decide what size fabric you want to get? Well, it depends on a few things. One, it depends on your eyesight. I use a magnifying lamp. It looks much like a ring light, but it has a magnifier on the inside of it. It's sitting right there just off screen. I got it on Amazon for like $30, and I don't need it necessarily. Because I've stitched on up to 32 count with no magnifier, but it does make it a lot easier to stitch. I started using it for as low as a 25 count, just to make it easier when I'm stitching, so that especially as it gets more dense with the stitches, it just makes it easier to make sure that I don't miss any stitches, like miss any holes. So I would suggest you investing in a magnifying lamp. It's not like it's going to cost you hundreds of dollars. Like I said, I got mine on Amazon for 30 bucks. It's really not. No, sorry, Gracie was about to jump on my open box of thread. That would have been, I would have had to pause the video. I would have been big mad. So I would advise you to invest in a magnifying lamp. They're really not that expensive, just to make your life easier. You are going to do it again, aren't you? 1 second. Let me just close these and move them. But, so your eyesight will kind of determine, for one, what you are comfortable stitching on. And there she goes. And the other thing is, how big do you want this piece? Like Catching Rays, the 1200 by 900 size piece, there is no way in hell I'd be able to fit that on a 14 count fabric. They just don't make it big enough. So if you want to do a large project, then, but you don't want it to cover your wall completely, then you're gonna need to go to a higher count fabric, because as you saw with those squares, it will start shrinking down. So what I did to find out how big of a piece of fabric I needed, I said this in one video, we're going to go over it again. So I have a little calculator here. So in order to find out what size fabric you need, let's take Catching Rays for example. So Catching Rays is 1200 wide. If, say I was like, well, I want to try to do it on an 18 count fabric because I think it's going to be easier for my eyeballs, right? So if you do, let's do the largest measurement first. So we're going to do 1200, and to find out the fabric size, or how big of a piece of fabric you need, you take the stitch count. So 1200, just this, we're going to do one side right now. You take the stitch count, divide it by the count of fabric that you're wanting to use. In this case, in this example, will be 18. And then you need to make sure, and that will give you like the inches of the design. And then you need to make sure that you remember to add your border, like the fabric border around. Some people feel comfortable doing a 2-inch border. I'm okay with doing a 2-inch border. I will make it work. But some people prefer to do a 3-inch border. That's the most common. If you go online and do, like Yarn Tree has a fabric size calculator on their thing. If you go on Yarn Tree, they have one, but most online fabric size calculators, they will auto insert a 3-inch border. So when you, but some people prefer 4 inches up to 6 inches. It just depends on your comfort level. So you divide the stitch count by the count of the fabric that you want to use, and then you have to add the border in. And do not forget, if say you want a 3-inch border, you need to add 6 to this total, because it's 3 inches on one side and 3 inches on the other side. So 3 plus 3 is 6. So we did, oh, I put 7,200. Let's try this again. Okay, so if we want to know how wide of a piece of fabric we need to get for this, and on 18 count, we do 1200, we divide it by 18, and we get 66.666666 inches. But we have to add the border. Say we want to do a 3-inch border. We need to add 6 to this total. So then we get 72.666666. And at that point, I would round up, because it's over 70. If with fabric, I try to, if I can, I err on the side of caution. If I need to, I will round up to the next ½ inch if I need to. 72.6, I might round down to 72.5. But I know I would need at least 72.5 inches. And then for the height of the piece, you would do, it's a 1200 by 900, so we would do 900 divided by 18, and don't forget to add in your fabric border of 3 inches on the top and the bottom, so 6 inches total. It would be 56. So I would need a piece of fabric that is 72.5 inches by 56 inches. I do not know how big the yards go regarding like the size of the bolt. I know that there's like 36, maybe 44. I don't know, but I don't think they make fabric that big. I don't think they do. So, say you're like, okay, well, the 18 count isn't gonna work. What if I go up to 25 count? And it's like, all right, well, let's try this again. Usually what I would do is I would just do the biggest number divided by 25 plus 6. So that would be 54 inches. So I would need a 54. That's a little bit more doable, I think. I honestly do not remember how big a bolt, like how wide a bolt can be. Like I know the length, like, you know, but you know what I'm talking about, right? How big it is on the bolt. I feel like it only goes up to 44 inches. China might be able to get you something bigger. I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, I opted for 32 count because I figured 32 count is about as high as I'm comfortable going. And it's gonna make it as basically as small as I can get it. So 1200 divided by 32 plus 6. I don't even know if I did a 3-inch border. I don't remember. 43.5. So I did 44. So it was basically the length of the bolt of fabric, and then the width was 900 divided by 32 plus 6. 34 inches. So it was like 44 by 34. And I think I got, because I bought it off 1-2-3 Stitch, I think I just got something that I got a bigger piece than what I needed because that was the size that encompassed both of those measurements. So when it comes to figuring out the type of fabric you want to use, that is how you would calculate how big of a piece of fabric you need. I have, over the past few years, I have received different counts of fabric from various friends or purchased it, and I have taken some of my full coverage pieces and I calculated out how big of a piece of fabric I would need in that count to see if I could get it to fit. One example of that was one I started last night from the Cross Stitch Studio that I don't know what I did. Oh, it's right here. What I did was I had received a piece of fabric from one of my subscribers. Well, I received a bunch of stuff, but in it was a piece of fabric from Heaven and Earth Designs, and it was a 25 count, and it said the size. And I was like, oh, 25 count, it's a 28 by 23. What project do I have that will fit on it? And I found one, Amazonia. It'll fit on there, just like that. You get a sneak peek if you're watching this before I post a floss tube showing it. And I'm doing this in diagonal stitching. I will have a video up regarding diagonal stitching at some point in the near future. But you could also do it that way. If you receive fabric from someone, you can figure out, kind of reverse engineer how big, or basically if you have patterns that you don't have fabric for, you can kind of figure out, well, if I have this pattern, will it fit? And it's like, well, no, that's gonna be way too small. Okay, well, do I have something, when you look at your measurements of your patterns, do I have something smaller that would fit on there? And that's kind of how I did it for some of the other pieces. I'm like, well, will this piece fit on here? No, this is way too big. Okay, measurement wise, what do I need something that's going to be less than this amount. Now, what I will say is, another thing you can do is, if you have said piece of fabric, right? If you want a 3-inch border, it's a Post-it note. You don't need a ruler. If you have, say you got this piece of fabric in the mail, right? And you wanted to figure out how big it was because it didn't come with the measurement, but you wanted to know how big of a project you could fit on here, and you want a 3-inch border, take a Post-it note, a regular standard Post-it note, and stick it up in the corner. I don't count the selvage as part of the border, so I just stick it up in the corner, and then I go to the next square that's catty corner to it, which is the square that I started that stitching in, and you can simply start counting 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, all the way across until you get to the 3-inch corner over here. And if you have a piece that's smaller than that, and then you do the same thing for this side, then you know that the piece will fit on there without having to do all the calculator math. That's another way to do it, if you have the fabric already. So if you have the fabric and you're like, well, I want to find something to stitch on it, then that's a good way to figure out how big of a piece you could get with it. So what are some of the places that you can go to get full coverage pieces? There are some stores on Etsy that have full coverage patterns. Oh God, hold on. Cross Stitch for Everyone has full coverage patterns on her Etsy store. Stitching Moon Designs, I don't think she put her shop on vacation, but she has some full coverage pieces on her site. I'm trying to think of the people that I've gone to on Etsy that have full coverage patterns, and I really don't remember everyone on Etsy. Popular websites to get full coverage patterns on are the Cross Stitch Studio, Artisy, Pain Free Crafts, Charting Creations, Tilton Crafts, Heaven and Earth Designs. Those are the 6. Oh wait, hold on. There's also Unconventional Cross Stitch, Unconventional X Stitch. There are definitely some out there that I'm not familiar with because I've never bought their patterns, but I've seen other floss tubers stitch them. But the first 6 that I named for the actual websites and the 2 Etsy shops, those are the 2 that I'm most familiar with. I don't have any pieces from Artisy or Tilton Crafts, but I have pieces from the other ones. And I'm in all of their Facebook groups, so I don't really have, I mean, you saw my Honeymoon Sunset piece, it's coming along beautifully, but that one's the furthest along. Like, I have probably over 40, probably more, full coverage pieces that are in some state of stitching, anywhere from 0.5% all the way up to this one's like, the Honeymoon Sunset's like 33%. And so if you will come across patterns that are hijacked, that are copyright. I would not suggest those because, for one, the artist, like Tapestry Market, has hijacked patterns, and like usually any of the sites on AliExpress, like any of the stores on AliExpress, stuff like that, their patterns are stolen. I would not suggest it, for one, because the person who actually put the effort into making the piece of art that you're trying to stitch does not get compensated for it, but also the quality is atrocious. It really is. It really, really is. So the sites that I named would be the ones that I would recommend that you check out. Though all of those sites, there's such a variety of pieces that you could find a piece. Oh, Golden Kite is another one. Golden Kite is another site that they do a lot of historic artwork. Not really my jam, but like I haven't really seen anything from Golden Kite that I'm like, oh wow, that's really nice. Maybe one piece, but I enjoy watching other people stitch it. Just not really my thing. Just like I stitch stuff that it's not really their thing, but they enjoy watching me stitch it. So say you buy a pattern and you're like, okay, I bought my pattern, I'm getting ready to go. What do you need for it? Well, first you need your fabric, which we went over how to calculate what size you need. I would recommend either getting pre-gridded fabric, which would be something like this. This is called an easy count. This is called an easy count Lugana, and a lot of stores sell it. I typically will get mine on 1, 2, 3 stitch, but you can also contact your local needlework shop if you have one near you. Actually, this particular piece of fabric I ordered from my LNS that I like to go to in Ocala. I asked her if she had some because I had seen somebody else stitching on it. She didn't have any with her, or no, she had some, but it wasn't big enough. So she ordered me a piece and had it shipped directly to my house. So you can contact your local needlework shop to see if they can get it for you if they don't already have some there. You can also go online to various cross stitch shops. Some of the shops actually will sell their stuff as kits where it comes with the fabric and the floss. I want to say a few of them will even opt for you to purchase the pattern and the fabric without the floss, because some people do not need to get the floss because they already have all the floss. So you need to get your fabric, so you have to calculate what size piece, what size fabric you want to stitch it on, and then obtain the fabric from either the LNS or an online store. You could also get non-gridded fabric. I would highly recommend that you grid it yourself if you do not trust your own counting. I mean, you have to be like very meticulous. Because most full coverage patterns are full of confetti. Confetti is where you have a crap ton of different colors in one section. They call it confetti because it looks like confetti. So it will get very frustrating and very overwhelming if you're used to large blocks of color and you dive into a full coverage piece on ungridded fabric and you've got like, I think one piece that I, just for funsies a couple years ago when I started it, I decided to track how much I stitched each different color. And I think in one page, like one section of the page, it was like leaves on a tree with the sky in the background. And I think I probably used 105 of the 133 colors that were in that piece, all in that one section. It was like ridiculous how much confetti there was. But it's looking really good. So either get pre-gridded fabric or grid the fabric yourself, or if you want to be a daredevil, go for it. Just don't be surprised if you make mistakes. Now, then you need to get your floss. Here's where my opinion differs from a lot of people. Do I buy the floss all at once? No, I do not. Do a lot of people buy their entire kit, like basically kit up the piece and buy all of the floss for said project? Yes, they do. The reasoning is for dye lot issues, because as things progress down the road, you will come across colors that will change with their shades over the years. So if you are using a floss that you've had in your box since 1988, and you have to buy a new one because you ran out, it can be a completely different shade of blue or red or purple or whatever it is. Because dye lots do change. I acknowledge that, and if I come across it, then I'm like, whoopsies. But I do not, now when floss goes on sale, I use DMC because it's easily accessible to me. I can pick it up the day I need it if I needed to. But when Joann's was having their sale and they would put their floss too low to show, I would go and I would stock up on the colors I knew I needed a lot of at once, whatever I could get. So I have a stack of boxes in here full of floss that I have been collecting over the past, probably over the past decade, to be perfectly honest, because I started wanting to build a full collection of DMC. I want to say probably before my kids were born, and my oldest will be 14 this month. So I've been collecting floss to purposely to build up my stash for the past 14, 15 years, but I've owned floss since way before that, since I was in middle school, high school, in the 90s. So you do not necessarily have to kit up your entire project all at once. You really don't, especially because if you get because some of these projects, you'll be like, oh my God, I need all the, I need, let's take another piece that I have, California Dreaming, Heaven and Earth Design. So the amount of colors on a full coverage piece can range anywhere from 90 up to 293. A lot of the websites will have a mid-range of the mid hundreds, anywhere from 133 to 150. That really, to me, my personal opinion, that is a real good sweet spot for the amount of colors for these large projects, especially when there's a lot of detail. Heaven and Earth Designs, most of their stuff starts off around 87 to 90 colors, and then you can pay a service fee for a color expansion, which would bring it up to about 150 colors. You could also pay a service fee to go straight to a max color, which is usually roughly around 293 colors. So I do have this piece. I do have this piece called California Dreaming from Heaven and Earth Designs, and it's a max color. So it has, where is it? 240 colors. And some of them have a crap ton of one color in particular, and some of them do not. So I have, right now, I am currently 18.78% along with the project. So I'm not very far along. Let me zoom out for a second so you don't see the pattern. But I have this, we'll talk about this in a minute, but I have this on Pattern Keeper, and I have my colors sorted so that the largest, in order of how many stitches are left in that color. So as you can see, 310 has the highest number of stitches remaining, which is about 8,900 stitches. If I scroll up, I have no zeros yet, which means no, a zero on Pattern Keeper or markup means that there are no stitches left of that color. If you work off a paper, you honestly really have no clue until you hit the end of the project, where you can actually visually see what stitches are left. But on programs like this, it will calculate how many stitches you have left of different colors. When I scroll up to the top to see the fewest number of stitches, that's color 794, which is 69 stitches. I don't think I've stitched anything in 794 yet. Maybe a little bit at the top. Not a whole lot though. And 564, I really don't think I stitched anything in 564. And there's eight. Oh, I definitely did not do 321, which has 90 colors or 90 stitches left. Now, when you purchase a pattern, it tells you how many skeins you're going to need of the floss, how many skeins you'll need to complete the project. So if it's basically if it's less than 3,000 stitches, it'll tell you you just really need one skein. If it's more than 3,000, like I want to say about every 2,500 to 3,000 stitches, it's going to add an extra skein on. So you have some that are going to need like, you know, multiple skeins of certain colors. But if I kitted this thing up from the very beginning, I would be buying a skein, an entire 8-yard length of DMC for 69 stitches of the color 794. That's a little ridiculous in my opinion, right? So I don't buy floss for these full coverage patterns because I've been slowly building up my stash over the years. You don't have to do that. If you were starting brand spanking new, then yes, you would have to do that because you have no floss. Or if you've only ever worked out of kits, you don't really have any floss. So yeah, you would have to. But if you have floss already in your stash, you do not have to kit up every single large full coverage project. You can do it as you go. If you happen to notice that you have, let's do Catching Rays because there's a shit ton of floss in that one. Catching Rays is a total of 1,080,000 stitches. So when I sort this out, 3846 has the highest number of stitches currently at 72,488. So I need a shit ton of 3846. So that's why whenever I go to the store, I pick up a handful of them and we'll eventually use them because that's where it goes. And then the lowest number for that is 797, which is 219 stitches. Do I need to buy an entire skein of 797 just for 219 stitches? No, I don't. That's like probably one length, like 1 6-strand length, you know, pulling those off because I can get, if I do one of my normal lengths and it doesn't knot up and I have to cut it, but if I do a normal length doing the single strand, I can get 100 stitches out of one length on 32 count. So you don't necessarily have to buy all the floss at once. I would suggest getting Pattern Keeper or Markup RXP for your comfort, for your ease. Yes, you can do these full coverages on paper. You absolutely can. I mean, full coverage projects have been sold before Pattern Keeper and Markup RXP came along. Do these programs make your life a hell of a lot easier? Yes, they do. They both have features where you can search for the symbols so you have a less chance of missing it. I use Pattern Keeper. I bought a tablet specifically for Pattern Keeper because I use a iPhone. I've used an iPhone for decades, so I bought an Android tablet specifically for Pattern Keeper. And so Pattern Keeper gives you the option of having page lines, like page breaks, gives you the option of adding diagonal lines onto your stitching if you want to stitch on the diagonal. It gives you the feature where you can park a thread. I'm pretty sure Markup RXP does all that too, but I don't use that program, so I'm not really completely familiar with all of it. But with Pattern Keeper, you can, like I was showing you, you can sort your colors by how many are left. If you like to do extreme cross-country stitching, it'll let you find all the colors like in whatever order you want to stitch it in. You'd be like, okay, this is where I'm gonna do this one first. I'm gonna get rid of all that 3846 first. What I would suggest is if you do something like this and maybe take a look at where these colors fall. And if you notice, because what I do try to do is if it's going to be a big block of color, I try to keep everything within the same range. Like there was one project where I was going to have to do a large chunk of color, and I was about to be close to the end of a skein, and my new bobbin was slightly different than the old one. And instead of doing some of the stitches in the old bobbin and then switching to the new one in this chunk of blue, I went ahead and just pulled out the new skein, and the new skein of floss, and I just did that whole chunk in blue, and then I used the old one on the confetti parts that were scattered throughout, because you know what? Nobody's gonna know. Nobody's gonna know. So this one is hiding place, and I just want to show you, this one has the largest, like sometimes it doesn't matter if it's from the same dye lot or not. Again, this is all my opinion. Some people will disagree with me. This is just my opinion, my observation. So hiding place from the Cross Stitch Studio. Let me just show you real quick what it's gonna look like. That's what it's gonna look like. Oh, I love this piece. That's what it's gonna look like when it's done, right? When you pull it up in Pattern Keeper and you look at the highest number of stitches for a particular color, the color is 3371, which is a dark brown, and it has 43,945 stitches. It is so spread out throughout the piece, it doesn't matter if I go to a different dye lot on it or not. It really is not going to make a difference. It's not a big hunk of color. So again, I just don't want, do with it what you will. If you want to buy all the floss at once, that's fine. You can also go cheaper and you can use CXC floss, which is way cheaper than DMC. You just have to ask various people where to get it from, because I have so much DMC, it's like, I could like probably, bathe in it. And so I've not had to buy any floss. I probably will not have to buy any floss for a few years, except for maybe one or two here or there of colors I use a lot of. But you can do cheaper. A lot of people are using CXC, and it is a lot cheaper to use, and you could easily kit up the entire project that way. Just don't feel that you have to. That's my point. Don't feel like you have to buy all of the floss. You don't have to. You can just buy some of it. That's all. You can just buy some just to get started, and then purchase it, because these things are going to take a long time. They really are. Even if you're a monogamous stitcher, they are going to take a very long time to complete. So let's move on to, why do people do more than one? Because it's pretty. Because I want to. That's really all it is. Full coverage stitching is for people who enjoy the act of stitching. I mean, honestly, it's really for people who enjoy the act of stitching. Do you get some people that finish these huge ass projects? Yeah, you do. But not everybody does. They have ideas for what they would like to do with the piece once it's done. Like Honeymoon Sunset, the one that's furthest along, I would love to frame it and hang it in my living room when I'm done with it. When will that happen? I have no clue. I have no clue. And there's some projects that I'm working on that I have no idea what I'm going to do with them. I just thought it was pretty and I wanted to stitch it. That's it. That's really the only reason. I have no plans for them. Like a lot of these projects, I have zero plans for. I don't expect to finish them anytime soon. You stitch, I feel like people stitch on full coverage stitches, full coverage projects, simply for the joy of stitching. That's it. I would never ever recommend you starting a full coverage project with a deadline. Unless that deadline is like 5 years in the future. I also would not honestly recommend stitching a piece intending to give it to someone else unless they are a very, very close personal friend or relative of yours who understand and can appreciate the time that it took to do the project. Because nothing is worse than stitching something for someone and they're like, oh, thanks, that's nice. And then you never see it again. Or you find it in the back of their closet. That hasn't happened to me. but I see it a lot on Facebook of people stitching projects for other people, and they give it to them. Oh, I made this project for my coworker and she doesn't like it. Well, unless like I have one project in mind that's not a full coverage, that's about this big, that if I ever do it, I will give it to my coworker because it's funny. Although at this point, I don't even remember what it says. I just remember that it's funny. But for the most part, like, yeah, this is something that you are doing for yourself, unless you have family members that truly understand and appreciate and will truly enjoy the finished piece. Like, you know, some people will do stuff for their kids that their kids truly appreciate the piece once it's done. So, you know, it's like, that's okay. But if you're just doing it, like, oh, I think that my aunt will like this, don't be surprised. But the only people who really know what you go through with these pieces are people who either are fellow stitchers or who have been watching you do it throughout the years. All right, now, how do you get started? How do you stitch these things? You know, real quick side note, I said in my last floss tube when I was talking about these videos, I don't want to make these videos an hour long. I really don't. And here we are, 51 minutes. And I'm still running my damn mouth. Okay. How do you stitch on these things? How do you get started? You can start however you wish. You can start, I would probably do some YouTube searches on different stitches. I'm actually going to be posting, you could actually look on my channel. I'm going to be posting a few different videos on different methods of stitching these full coverage projects. Some people will stitch in a very particular method. Some people will do, some people will put it on either their scroll frame or their Q-snap or a hoop and stitch, like say they do a Q-snap or a hoop. I know some people will like to stitch within that frame, within that Q-snap or their hoop, and then they move it and they work on the next thing until that's fully done, and then they move it, and so on and so on and so on. Some people like to stitch by page, and they will stitch the entire page, and then once the page is done, they will move on to the next one. Some people like to do extreme cross country. I would love to do that, but I would get so bored with it. And they would do, like, since I have this pulled up already, they would do this piece right here. They would do everything in 3371 until it was completely done, and then they would move on to 898, and then they would move on to 310, and so on and so on and so on. Some people will do extreme cross country and they will do the highest color first, and then they will go down to the lowest number, because that's usually, like, say you did the 3371 to get all that done, and then you would go to 3865 and get those knocked out, but you would do the highest color first to give you basically the bones of the project, to give you good points to count off from. And then they would like kind of start here, and then they would start working their way up. Some people will do the extreme cross country and they do the highest and then the lowest and then the highest and then the lowest and go back and forth like that. Some people will do cross country within a section where they, like, say you have it on your frame and you do cross country within the frame until you finish what's in the frame. You could also do block stitching, where you stitch everything in the 100 diagonal block, and then you would park your thread. I have a parking tutorial on my page as well. It's in my playlist. You would park your thread either next to it or below it, or, you know, whatever. There's also Royal Rows, where you do blocks of 10 by 20 and you park below. And there's also diagonal stitching, where you stitch on the diagonal like this, where you do either 10 or 20 wide diagonal sections and you stitch within that diagonal. So benefits to extreme cross country or even cross country within a section is that you can get that color knocked out bit by bit, right? The benefits to working page by page is that you see the pages come to life. Working in the diagonal, you get to see the piece come to life bit by bit as well. And then as you move further along, these diagonals will get longer and longer. Some people like to start stitch in the diagonal because it kind of helps get them as they get further along. It kind of gets them to the fun stuff quicker than if they were doing page by page going across. Because like this piece right here that I'm doing on the diagonal, I change my methods so much, as you can see from the projects that I've shown so far. But let me just show real quick. So this is the piece I'm doing on the diagonal right now, and I'm up here in this corner. So as I come down, I'm gonna get to that bird pretty quick. But if I was doing page by page, I would be doing nothing but like background leaves and that flower and stuff before, and then, you know, like half of another page before I finally start getting to the bird. So doing it in the diagonal will kind of get you to the fun stuff faster, because you're kind of basically, you know, filling it in like that. And you can do diagonal across the entire piece. You can do diagonal by page. It's up to you. It's all in how you want to stitch it. I know that there's also the typewriter method, where you take the very first symbol of where you're going to, like, you know, very first symbol of the corner that you want to start in, and you take that symbol and you stitch it, and you just kind of go as it flows, and then you take the next symbol and you know, in the very top row, and, you know, do it that way. There's so many different methods, and you are going to end up most likely changing the method that you stitch as you stitch on a piece. For example, Honeymoon Sunset. I started this piece, and show it again. I started this piece up here in the upper left-hand corner, okay? Hang on, I dropped before I put my dirty ass shoes on my white fabric. I started this piece in the upper left-hand corner, and I started parking in the diagonal up here. But because there was so much confetti, and I feel it's probably because of the way I was stitching, I was noticing I was like getting a lot of bumps right here, right? So I freaked out and I stopped doing that, and I started stitching kind of almost cross country, and I was trying to fill in the page by page. And then I don't know why, but I panicked. I was like, God, am I gonna have enough room? So I started working my way across, and as I was over here, I decided to stitch in 10 by 20 columns. And it's actually starting to fall out, like kind of loosen up now that it's been, because I've been working on this since 2019, but it's starting to loosen up. But as you can see, there's some kind of lines right there, but I think they're gonna kind of go away once it starts getting stitched up more. And then over here, I was doing block by block. And again, I don't know if it's true lines or if it's just the grid lines. I'm honestly not sure, because it doesn't feel bumpy right there. So it might just be the grid lines that are kind of showing through. Anyway, but I've done cross country, as you can see. I've worked my way all around. I've done almost like a typewriter method, where you take a square and you fill it in. Right now, I'm trying to convert this piece into diagonal stitching, but coming from the right, because I wanted to do an experiment, which I will talk about in another time. But I'm trying to I want to start converting this piece to diagonal stitching, so start doing it like this. And this is tent stitch. This is half crosses. So each stitch, it's 25 count fabric, and it's 2 strands tent stitch. Pay no attention to my fat fingers, but it's hard to see what I mean right there. So that's tent stitch, and Amazonia is also tent stitch. Those are all half stitches. Those are not full stitches. Catching Rays on the 32 count is a full cross. I wanted to show It's hard to tell, but this is full cross and it's with one strand. So we're going to talk real quick about full cross versus tent stitch, and then I think I will be done. Tent stitch and full cross, they're overall going to give you the same look. You will probably only hear that opinion from people who are okay with doing tent stitch on full coverage projects. If a lot of diehard full cross people will say, no, it doesn't look the same. Well, to me it does. I'm okay doing either one. Tent stitch will get you through a project a lot faster. Some people will say that tent stitch doesn't give you as much coverage as full cross does. I beg to differ depending on the size of fabric and the number of threads that you use. If you're doing anywhere from like a 14 count to a 20 count Aida, my recommendation, what I would personally do, is I would do 2 strands full cross. I have Birdhouse Gardens, which is 2 strands full cross on a 20 count Aida, easy count Aida. The Aida comes in easy count too. But this is 2 strands full cross and it's perfectly fine. And I personally don't really see any difference between this and my 25 count 2 strands tent stitch. I'm not really a big fan of 22 count fabric personally. I've only had one experience with it and it sucked because it was like right at that in between where 2 strands full cross was too thick, 1 strand full cross was too thin. Maybe 2 strands tent stitch might be okay. I don't know. But if you do 25 count fabric, typically, I don't know if all of them do it, but I know Heaven and Earth Designs recommends 25 count 2 strands full cross. I would not recommend that. That is way, way, way too thick. It's gonna end up being like a carpet. 25 count and 25 and 28 count, what am I trying to say? 25 count, I will typically do 2 strands half cross. I think maybe 1 strand full cross would probably give you decent coverage and it would be a lot thinner because it's only 1 strand as opposed to 2 on the front and the back. But I typically will do 2 strands half cross on the 25 count fabric, and 28 I could go either way. 32 count I would probably just stick with 1 strand full cross on 32 count. I have seen some floss tubers doing full coverage pieces on 40 count Verdal, one strand half cross because it's so tiny because they're doing it over 1. But those would just be my recommendations. If it's going to be on the Aida, which goes up to 20 count, you could do 2 strands full cross, no problem. Some people will even do 1 strand full cross. You just have to do test stitch. Like take the corner. Where's my paid sow? You can do a test stitch and see what kind of coverage. I would recommend picking a dark color. I'm looking for something in particular, and this is what happens when you're not organized. But you can take, I'm looking for a project in particular because I wanted to show you, because I did do a test stitch on my Haid style to see what I wanted to do. Here it is. So I wanted to do for sure, because this thing does have a deadline. This piece right here, this does have a deadline. If I can finish it by the end of the year, then I can get all the charts that were offered for the Sal plus 2 free ones off of her website. So I'm like, I need to make sure I can get this done. Tent stitch will work much faster for me. So I wanted to know, should I do 2 strands tent stitch or 1 strand tent stitch? I wasn't entirely sure. So I did a test stitch in the corner. And this one is 1 strand tent stitch, which isn't awful, but as you can see, if I would have done a full cross, the coverage would have been perfectly fine. This is 2 strands tent stitch. right there. So you can do a test stitch. I would recommend that you use a darker fabric, darker thread, and do a couple different methods so that you can see what works for you. And I would probably do at least a 5x5 square, if not a 10x10 square of the stitching, so that you can kind of get an idea of how thick it would be once you started getting more stitches in. Like, don't do like 5 stitches, do like a block. Not like 100 square block, but something like that, where you can kind of get a better idea of the coverage. Oh shit, I was gonna say something. Color of the fabric, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. Color of the fabric does not matter. I mean, if you wanted to, you could do like, you know, a slightly darker fabric if it was a mostly dark project to avoid white fabric even glimpsing through. But for the most part, honestly, like, it doesn't freaking matter because the stitches are covering it up. What I think is a little off is when people do really fancy fabrics for full coverage pieces. You'll see some people that will do full coverage pieces on hand dyed fabrics, and they say, well, I like looking at the fabric while I'm stitching. I totally get that. I get it. You want something pretty to look at. You're tired of looking at boring ass white, right? But I feel like hand dyed fabrics are a pretty penny. I don't want to waste my fabric on something that's going to get completely covered in stitching. It's just my opinion. Now, if I had a piece of like some kind of off color that I probably wouldn't use for anything else, then yeah, sure, I probably would use it for a full coverage if it fit. But for the most part, I wouldn't venture into the world of beautiful hand-dyed fabrics to put a full coverage piece on. I would save the pretty fabric for a piece that would accentuate the fabric, not cover it up with thread. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I can think of. I don't think so. I don't think there's anything else. Just keep this in mind. If you're scared to start a full coverage, it's just stitching. There's like, I get it. I was super nervous when I first started my very first full coverage piece. I was very nervous, but you know what? It's just cross stitching. That's all it is. It's no different than any other project you have. It's probably the easiest thing that you will do because it's literally one X after another. Like I'd say probably 98 to 99% of full coverage pieces do not have any back stitching. That's what drew me to it, was that I'm like, this beautiful piece and there's no back stitching? What? Like 99% of these full coverage pieces have 0 back stitching in them. It's all in the detail in the actual stitching. That's all it is. They're just X's. I get being nervous, but don't let the size scare you off if it's something that you're interested in. And also pick a project that you love, because you're going to be staring at this thing for many years. And if you feel about it, I would not recommend starting it. If you are just getting it just to get it, I would not recommend starting it. Like, you need to really enjoy the piece that you're working on, or else you will grow to hate it and you're going to end up trashing it, and it's going to be a waste of fabric, a waste of thread, a waste of your time when you could have been doing something that you love. So if you have any questions, I think that might be it. I feel like there's more I want to say, but I might have to just do that in a future video. But I hope that you were able to get something from this. Oh, real quick. So yeah, no, I don't kit up each project as I go. I will do a separate video for this because somebody asked, but this is my master set of floss. I have all the colors in here. It's a little empty right now because I pulled some out for something. But this is all the DMC colors. on bobbins. I bobbinate, which again, I will go over in another video, but I bobbinate. So I have all my DMC here in this box. So that's why I don't kit up every single full coverage project, because I have the full set right here, and I only have to replace a bobbin like maybe once or twice a month. And I stitch, like if you've seen my stuff, I stitch a lot. So for me to only have to replace one particular color maybe a couple times a month, like this stuff lasts you a while. So you don't, you know, if you're gonna start like 5 different full coverage projects, you don't need to get 5 different sets of floss for this stuff. Get your pattern, look at how many stitches that you need for each said color. And if you wanted to like try to, you know, do some kitting up, look at how many stitches you have of each color on the pattern, right? If you use Pattern Keeper or Markup RXP, see if you have the floss already. If you have something that has 219 colors and you have a full bobbin of it, pull off some lengths of that bobbin and call it a day. Don't buy a whole skein just for 200 colors, because honestly, that's like typically 1 to 2 lengths, depending on how much you stitch and where the stitches are in the pattern, really. But if you have something that has 40,000 stitches and you're like very gung-ho and you want each one to have its own set of floss, then sure, go ahead and get it. If you want to know how many stitches you can get out of a skein, Lord Libidin has a kind of like a little calculator that I will link down below. Hopefully I remember to do that. But he has a calculator that kind of gauges how many stitches you can get out of a project. And over the years, I've noticed that when I use because I do like my hand to my elbow and then I fold it back up to my hand, right? So I have basically my length is this long plus maybe about that much. So it might be from my elbow to maybe about here. That's how long my length is when I'm doing 2-stranded stitching, because I double it and I do a loop start. I would probably cut that in half for single strand because it gets knotted up really bad if you don't. But if I did use that entire, like from here to here of a single strand, I usually can get anywhere from about 70 to 100 stitches. No, if I use that entire loop as a single strand, I can get well over 100 stitches on it, depending on the count of fabric. So you'll kind of start gauging how much floss you use based on the size of the fabric and how long your floss is when you start stitching. But I'm going to try to link his little calculator thing down below so you can kind of see how much floss you would use in a single skein. Because to me, I think it's a little ridiculous to completely kit up from scratch every single full coverage project you have, especially once you start getting into where you're like got 2, 3, 4, 5 on the go. You don't need that much. You don't need an entire skein of every single color. You really don't. You can distribute amongst the projects. So anyway, if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section down below. If you like what you had to see or not already subscribed, then go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below and the bell to be notified whenever I post a new video. I'm probably going to post this one before I post anything else regarding full coverage stitching. I have a video about stitching on the diagonal, starting a project on the diagonal, and about converting a project from whatever kind of stitching you were doing before into diagonal stitching, if you wanted to try it. And then, like I said, I have a video about parking. A bunch of videos going to be coming up over the next like month or two, so just keep your eyes out for them. And if you have any questions, again, feel free to ask. If I need to do a follow-up video, then I absolutely will. I have no problems with that. So take care, happy stitching, get a lot of stitches in, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.